a name yet for the bell choir?
The bell choir.
The ding-a-ling.
The ding-a-lings are good. I like that. Yeah. I think we need to have a contest, and the person who wins the contest gets to wear the special banner. They get a sash and a peace prize. There you go.
Or they could conduct the next anthem, the next bell anthem.
And they can,
whoever wins it can conduct them next time.
They can be our conductor. I like it. So where do we look for peace? Where do we look, first of all, where do we look for God's presence in the world? What's the best place for us to find God's work? As God is in the world and God is working all the time, not just a creator that spun it into being and then pulled back and said, hey, all right, good luck on that one. I'll be over here in the cosmos, kind of hanging out. In early Christianity, there was a group that thought this. They were more about, God like spinning a basketball on your finger and then lifting it off into space and sort of pulling back and watching from a distance. So everybody kept looking up, thinking, okay, God must be somewhere else. Well, the problem with that is if you put God too far away, then God's not relatable anymore. God is something to be feared, someone to be feared. But there's another group that said, no, God is here and in everything. God's everywhere. God's in every fiber of the material that you're wearing today. Or God is so close that you can't imagine yourself separate from this. God is in every fly, every cockroach, every thing we can't explain in this earth, like mosquitoes. I mean, why would God be so close or so finite that there would not be the ability to worship a God that is infinite? So early religion, but also early Christianity, really struggled with how close is God? And when we look at it, I had to write a paper, as every pastor does. You have to write what's called a theological disposition paper in seminary, something to that effect. It basically is a master's thesis and dissertation. And so when I wrote mine, I was looking for the word that would describe the appropriate relationship between us and God. And deism is this idea of this massive sort of power, but inaccessible. And then there's panentheism, where God is trapped in all things and yet separate. And then there's dualism, and there's all these sorts of words. But I settled on one that is very rarely used. It just so happens that C.S. Lewis uses this word as well. And it comes out of a term where you shorten and you take off the negative aspects, and it's called pantheism. And it means in the Latin to be in relationship. It means to relate to God. That the whole purpose of seeing where God is at work in the world means that we need to know something about God and have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ to kind of see it, to observe it, and to take notice of where God is working. So let's just use a quick example here. Let me get this on. Let's go to the next slide since it's not working here. Let's try it. Today is Pearl Harbor Day. It's been a number of years, but since December 7th has fallen on a Sunday. Because of leap year, we leapt over it for a few years as well. But you might have been around in 1941. How many of you were around in 1941? I see 4 hands in our congregation. Well, first of all, let's thank them for still being with us. 5 hands. Yeah. Because you don't get to be this old by not trying. And we should honor those of you that even though you might have been a baby in those days, you still lived through the day of infamy. There's a day when I don't think we can quite understand it, especially those that have been born later. But it is the 84th anniversary, and it is not an anniversary most people want to celebrate. And on that day, many people were looking for God. They were looking for God in the burning wreck and the oil on the water in Pearl Harbor that took the lives of people who ran to the edge of the ship just to get off. For the people that were on the Arizona and they knew the ship was going down, their bodies still to be exhumed, maybe someday. But if you've ever stood on top of the Arizona, John was talking about the one bubble that comes every so many minutes to the surface. And it's just a reminder that there were lives, people praying in those holes and down in the barracks, in their bunks, or maybe in an engine room, trying to get the ship to get out of the channel in time. My dad was not there, but he was alive this time. He was 18 years old. 17, going on 18. I think he lied to get into the military. But he heard the news because he had a friend who was stationed at Wheeler Air Force Base. It's actually Wheeler Army Air Corps Base, and it's right next to a famous barracks called the Schofield Barracks. And all that's in one giant section of land right in the middle of the island of Oahu in Hawaii. Well, my dad's friend was that day, that Sunday morning. He should have been in the barracks with the rest of his buddies, the people that he was serving with, friends and fellow soldiers, brothers in arms. But Saturday night came before Sunday morning, and in Hawaii, if you were stationed there, it didn't seem like it was a place you really had to work as hard, maybe as another serviceman somewhere else. And we were not at war on December 6th, 1941. A war was happening. It was happening in other countries and in other parts of the world, but we had not yet entered this. So for those of you that have never studied this part of our history, you should know that it takes the act of a president and then also the agreement of Congress that we would move into an actual state of war. But we weren't expecting this, and neither were the people in Hawaii. So my dad's friend, he happened to go out Saturday night with this nice young woman, and they went down to the beach, and they might have actually stayed on the beach all night. And the next morning, when he realized he was late, he jumped in his Jeep that he might have borrowed from the motor pool or something like that. I don't remember all the story, but I can imagine it. And he's driving back as fast as he can to get to his barracks. Now, the attack happened. And it happened in such a way that those that were driving in from the North Shore could observe the planes and the bombers and the torpedo planes early, before they struck. Well, in a movie that recaptures this, it's worth watching the less romanticized story of the story of Pearl Harbor, and it's a documentary film that was called Tora, 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 and it had a lot of the original footage in there of the actual attack. And there is one scene where a bomb was actually a bomb that wasn't supposed to be dropped on the barracks. It was supposed to be dropped on the aircraft and the parts of the airfield to keep the U.S. forces from taking off. But this one fell on the barracks. And in the movie, it explodes. Well, that was my dad's friend's barracks. Those were his people that were depicted, the officers that were there. He goes on to serve the rest of the war. He is discharged eventually. He gets married. He has 2 sons. They're friends that lived not too far from us when we were in Florida. And my dad's friend's life, I met him many times. It was a life about looking for where God is an active participant in this life. And how could he ever forgive himself for not being there for his buddies and his friends? And I'm sure many consoled him and said, you know, if you'd have been there, you wouldn't have the life you have now. You wouldn't be serving your country and your family and all these other people in your life as you do. But I don't think that he ever got past this. Just my sense, and I was a 10-year-old boy. I didn't know anything from anything, but I did know that we honored him as often as we could, and we also honored the fact that he was a good dad, and he was a great husband, and his boys grew up with my older brothers, and there was a relationship there. But the tragedy doesn't happen in this man's life. You see, His son is into advanced scuba diving. In fact, he had a job for taking equipment and testing it for scuba companies. So Rob, he's in the pool testing a special emergency drop weight system out of BC. And for those of you that are divers, you know that this is something you have to do in an emergency, is to lose the weight, shed the weight, and get to the surface. And so he's testing this while his mother is floating on a raft on the pool above him. Well, the equipment doesn't work the way it's supposed to. He drowns. While his mom is floating above him, she fell asleep, and then they found him later. A few years after that, she dies of cancer. You can tell that Mr. Hartley took a whole lifetime to try to figure out what was next. And eventually, he was not able to survive that. He ended up taking his life. And I often think about, where did he find peace? Where could he find peace? I don't know anything about his religious beliefs or his faith. I just know that we as a family cared for him deeply and for his whole family. And we were there for all of those services. Probably the few times my parents went to church was, to honor this wonderful man and also every part of his family that we could. And so I know that this is just a tragic story, but it is a story that is so common to us today, where people think that when somebody passes, or when we're not where we're supposed to be, or where we're not where we think we're supposed to be, we got to blame somebody. And this is what I remember about this man. He never blamed anybody for any of these tragedies. He just knew that God somehow was active. Not exactly sure where. And I'm sure he found peace in certain moments of life. It's hard for us to think back and not try to blame somebody. Hey, my dad was actively involved in the Don't Buy a Japanese Vehicle campaign. He bought General Motors products from the day he got out of the war to the day that he passed. And some of them were really lousy cars, but it didn't matter to him because he wasn't going to buy something Japanese. Until my mom said, hey, I like that little VW convertible, that Bug that's a convertible. You remember this? 1970s. This was kind of the newer Bug. But it was orange, and she said, that's what I want. And since she had been driving station wagons that were from World War II most of her life, she decided she was going to get what she wanted, and so he bought a Volkswagen. That was a lot for my dad. Then my oldest brother, second oldest brother actually, he drove home one day from college, and he showed up in a little Honda Civic, the very first CVCC Civic. It was the size of a beach ball, basically, and he got out with such joy and enthusiasm, and my dad just, okay, whatever. And I get this because when we were in Georgia, we bought a Honda Accord, and most of the church I served was they were in the GM plant down the road there, and when the pastor was going to go buy a car, he was supposed to buy a GM car. I already had a GM truck that never ran, so I was in this camp of, But you see how hatred and blame and this idea, if you align with a certain group or a certain number of people, or somehow a nationality becomes something that symbolizes a group of people. When I was standing on the USS Arizona with my wife, I was in a group of tourists. We were part of them. And we were standing right next to a very large group of people. On our right, there were Japanese. And on our left, we had some people from all over the other parts of the world. And the park ranger said, we're going to pause for a moment of silence. And if you're religious, I would ask you to pray at this time. If you're not, just stand there in reverence for the people that you're standing on top of, who paid a price for you to be free enough to come to this country and to stand at this place. And so he asked us to be quiet and close our eyes. To my surprise, pretty much everybody in this group was silent, and they were meditative. Maybe they weren't praying, and I was the only one looking around to see everybody else was doing. They're all like focused. And then he said, when you open your eyes, you're going to see the world that you live in now. You're not going to see the world that is bathed in the blood of the wars that have been fought. You're going to bathe in the freedom because people have paid a price for you to be here today. So wherever you came from, you now are welcome on this soil and on this monument. It was church. We had church right there standing over the Arizona. And I thought, God is at work right here in this place right now. I wanted to turn around and greet everybody in the name of Christ. I knew that wouldn't have gone over big for some, but I just, and we had this conversation going with the group from Japan, and they were talking about how overwhelmed they were by understanding what they were a part of that day. God was at work there. God was working through a U.S. National Park ranger. God works everywhere, every day. God is at work right now while we sit here in this church. God is busy trying to remind us that we have to search for peace and we have to work at it a little bit. But as long as we're not searching for blaming somebody or anger or someone to back up our resentment, because this is what we do when we really get angry about something. We go get someone else to talk to about it, and then they can be angry with us. What is it my grandmother used to say? Misery. Exactly. And misery begets misery. And anger begets anger. And violence begets violence. I mean, these are age-old human problems that we still face today. But when we actively look for peace, we need to actively look for where God is creating peace. Moments here and there. People here and there. This is what happened to our Magi friends. Now, today's not Epiphany, I get it. We're not really in a state of talking about Epiphany, where the wise men, the Magi, let's call them by their real names, the Magi who showed up looking for Jesus. Many believe that Christmas itself, the birth of Christ, doesn't happen until it's recognized by someone who's not part of the inner circle. This tradition of waiting until January 6th to celebrate Christmas is I got a shocker for you here. The majority of the world waits until January 6th. In the United States, we've been forced into the 25th because someone picked that for us. But per capita, or according to the populations, most people don't celebrate the same time we do. I was just talking to Andreas in the back before I came up to preach, and he said, he's used to having Jesus not in the manger yet, because in a lot of traditions, Jesus is not in the manger until the night of the 24th, at least to the 25th. We can't even wait for that. We just put our creches out and we're done. So we have this beautiful display of creches that are up in the family ministry building right after church. Please go take a look. They're beautiful, and they're from all over the world. So the Magi show up, and they're talking to this megalomaniac, and his name is Herod. He got the title Herod the Great, not because Caesar thought much of him. In the beginning, Caesar thought he was a pretty strong leader, but Herod gets more and more crazy as time goes on. He's really a philanthropist. He's kind of a strange mixture of generosity for power and the idea that if you're going to build something, somebody should honor you for building that. But here we are in Luke, and I'm only giving you one verse today. I figure we might even be able to memorize this. Did you memorize the verse when it was read to you today? You got it down? Anybody want to try? Without looking at your phone? All right, we'll jump back to it one more time, Mika, if you would. Now, I've added the words in here because verse 1 tells you who it is that's speaking, but this is verse 2. So let's read it. The Magi asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star and it rose, and has come to worship him." Now, they asked this question because they've been studying the stars. The Magi are studiers of galactic and scholastic ventures. They come from an Eastern country. They are not Jewish. They are not necessarily religious under the one God, but they've heard that, and they knew that the Messiah would be born when this particular supernova was going to take hold in the sky. So they saw the star once, and then they journeyed as far as they could to follow it, but then they get to Israel and they have to see the star again. So this doesn't stay in the sky forever. So some people postulate, some scholars have said that the Magi are actually journeying for months. Others say years. Others say we're not even sure exactly who they were, even though they got 3 names. By the way, the 3 names weren't given to them until much further on in history. Like we're talking about maybe the mid-7th or 8th century before they actually get names. So whoever dug their names up was probably their mom, who said they need to get credit. But we're not sure how they're related. We do know that they are educated, wealthy people. They really are more like kings, and that's why we get this hymn, "We 3 kings of Orient are." But the Magi are educators, teachers, professors. They're students of history and of the sky. And so they're asking for the King of the Jews because they don't know who else to ask for. They just know that someone's going to be born that will be the Messiah that has been promised in all of the Old Testament prophecies. So they're there to find out where they are going to go next. But they end up with Herod. Why do they go to Herod? Because Herod is the king, and they figure if anybody's going to know who the new king is, it's going to be Herod. As you know, Mary and Joseph are in a place called Bethlehem because of the census that's being drawn up. The census is being called by somebody else, but Herod's going to take credit for this. And they're in this place called Bethlehem. It's the city of David. It's more importantly a place where you would have to go if you were from the house of David, which, by the way, both Joseph and Mary are from the house of David. Anyway, getting back to Herod the Great, he's a crafty, brilliant architect. He's the one that not only put the money up to rebuild the temple for the Jews, but he also rebuilt the temple and paid for most of it. And most of the slaves that worked under this were paid if they survived. He was kind of generous in a way, but at the same time, he's been given this position because he's successfully manipulated somebody called Marcus Antonius. And if you don't know his story, he's one of the most ruthless Roman leaders who was putting the right people in the right places to make sure that Rome would stay in power. But as he is also Herod the Great, he is half Jew and he is half Edomite, meaning that he has equal hatred from both peoples. The Jews hate him because he came from Jewish roots, but at the same time, he didn't honor the Jewish people. He lost favor with them progressively every year that he was in office. And he was sent there by Caesar. But even Caesar, in his later years, recalls him and says, you've gotten too far. Especially when he puts an edict out to say that every child born in the country or the nation under his rule, which would be southern Israel, all those male children should be executed if they are under 1 year old. This is the progression of his hatred. The lack of peace in his life. What he's seeking and what he's looking for to keep some sort of sense in his life was power and political control. And this is what he did. And he did it in such a way that until he died, by the way, he died somewhere around 4 AD, we're not exactly sure. So 4 years after all this takes place and Jesus has been born, and before Jesus starts his ministry, Herod the Great leaves us, and Herod's son takes over, Herod number 2. And when Jesus is then being, put in front of Herod, we're talking about Herod the Antipas. So it's yet another descendant, maybe the son, maybe the grandson. But Herod the Great is this person who by no way is going to give this sort of credence to anyone else in his land that there would be a Lord that is born. He was not looking for peace. He was not looking for reconciliation. He was not looking for influencing people any longer. He did it strictly by fear. Now, I point to him because the Magi go to him, and when they ask this question, the Magi are looking for the one who they believe is born of God and is the source of peace. But this is what happens. There's this progression in which these men, they just continue to follow in the ways that they need to go. And they didn't believe the lie. They didn't believe that they needed to go back and tell Herod where Jesus was born. Although if Herod was really that brilliant, all he had to do was open the scrolls of the Old Testament and find out that he was going to be born in the city of David. It didn't have the name Bethlehem on it, but you don't have to go too far to figure out where that is. Everybody else knew. So the story is to tell us that we find peace when we find where God is working in the world. Where is God working in this world? I hear you.
Inside.
Yeah, God is working inside us, yes. But is God simply restricted to us? Is this the only place that peace can take place? If you had to name a place right now where you think good things are happening and that God might be involved with that good thing that's taken place, where would you look right now? Where would you highlight it? Where would you go spend money to support it? Just tell me where you're finding places of peace in your life, in our community, in our world. Just a place. I just need to know kind of where. Yes, Pat?
I think you want to raise. I've lived in this valley over 60 years, and everybody in the room probably understands what I said. Every time I drive in and take a look at Boney, I think, thank you, Lord. I didn't choose to come here. This is where I landed.
So Boney Mountain for you is a reminder. How many would agree with that? Boney Mountain is a symbol of a steady place for us. Stability. I like that. I like that. And God might still be involved with that, you know? And decides to turn it green every once in a while. I think that's a beautiful thing. Where else in your life do you find peace? Here, right in this church. Yeah, absolutely. The ocean. So I'm hearing nature is a part of this, right? The natural order of things around us. My friend next door, he has hummingbird feeders. He's got like 10 of them. And there is a buzz going in his backyard. You hear their hum? And if you get between them and their feeder, they are not so cute. I walked over there to say hi to them one day, and I got attacked by at least 3 of them. They're, yeah. So where in your life do you find peace? Music, yes. Did you say that? Music, yes. Yeah. Water. Yeah. Our waterfall. You know, it takes some effort. God's elves are up there every Sunday, and those elves are providing for us the waterfall. That is not natural, but the water that comes out of it is. And I think we should thank our waterfall crew for doing this every week. Yeah. Yes, please.
Children or babies sleeping.
Children sleeping babies. Yeah. Amen. Amen. Right. They're so cute when they're sleeping. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You know, if you walk into James Storehouse, the front office, you just feel God working in the lives of all of these foster parents who have children that are not their own, that become their own. And they're always cuter when they're sleeping. But not all foster kids sleep all the time. So they are in the trenches with them all the time. Yes, Randy?
When I'm on the phone, which is every day with my sister in Indiana,
Yeah.
we share we relive and share a lot of memories of things that we did with our parents when we were children, growing up.
Yeah.
We delighted, do you remember when we did
Right.
this, or do you remember when they did that?
Yeah, and that brings peace.
It's all in here.
The beauty of a memory is you get to edit it any way you want. You know, because,
I didn't understand it.
well, that's okay. No, it's saying it is.
Tell
that
me what you said.
memories become more precious with time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, my hands are cold. I know, and we're going to get to communion here. This is God at work. It's an odd thing why Jesus said, I want you to do this often. And when you do this, I want you to remember that I am in this. See, the incarnation of Jesus Christ doesn't just happen as a memory. It's not just something that happened once because God gave birth through a young woman into this world through the Holy Spirit, the gift of the baby, Jesus. But Jesus came as a baby to remind us we have to do things in repetition. Jesus was probably pretty darn cute when he was asleep, but he might have been cute even when his eyes were open. They say he didn't cry. Nah. If you're a baby, you cry. How else do you make your needs known? So the beauty of incarnation for us is that when we don't find peace here very easily, we can go sit by an ocean, we can go hike to Boney, we can go a lot of places. Go into your backyard. Look at the flowers you've been tending all year. Look at the beauty of a poinsettia. Poinsettias are not permanent. They come and they go. But in the moment of that beauty, we realize just like life, just like my friend, his son, his wife, just like so many who gave their lives on this day in Pearl Harbor. As life leaves us, God does not. God is at work. Have you ever been to a memorial service where you felt the peace of God at work? Because you're not just there grieving someone who's left you. You're remembering that person and all they meant to you and how much joy they brought to you. The purpose of a memorial is for us to memorialize the person's life, to give celebration to God that that's not the end of their life. But it's not an abstract thing. Incarnation, God with us, is something that happens every single day in the people around us. We got a lot to get to today. But I just want us to stay in the moment, just for a moment, and give God thanks for the peace you might be feeling right now because of the gift that God has given you. And if you still don't like Japanese cars, just let it go. Let it go. Let's pray for a moment while I get ready for us up here.